I never thought I'd be told to wait in the car like a stranger. Not by my own family. Not on the day I was born. Not on my birthday. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, hands shaking, rain tapping against the windshield like a slow, cruel drumbeat. I didn't even turn the engine off. I just sat in silence, watching the front door of my son's house, the same house I helped him buy, stay shut. No one came out. It all started with a phone call that morning. My son, Daniel, had said, "Mom, come over around 6. Just the family. We've got something planned for your birthday." I smiled so wide when I heard that. My heart lifted. I thought maybe they finally remembered. Maybe this year, I wouldn't be alone like last year. So I put on my nicest dress, the dark blue one with the pearl buttons, and I wore my mother's old brooch, the one she gave me before she passed. I even wrapped a small present for Lily, my granddaughter. A little hair clip shaped like a butterfly. I wanted to give it to her before dinner. She always loved those small things. But when I pulled up to the house, something felt wrong. The lights were on. There were cars in the driveway. Music was playing inside. But the front door never opened. I called Daniel's phone. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I got out of the car, umbrella in hand, and walked to the door. I knocked once, then twice. Nothing. I texted. "I'm outside. Should I come in?" 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My phone buzzed. It was from Lena, my daughter-in-law. Her message said, "Just wait in the car a bit. We're still getting things ready." I didn't understand. They'd invited me for dinner. What were they preparing that I wasn't allowed to see? But I didn't want to make a fuss, so I nodded to myself and walked back to the car. The rain started coming down harder. I turned on the wipers. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Then a full hour. Still no one came out. I turned off the engine to save gas. My hands were freezing. I didn't want to call again. I thought maybe they were just running late or forgot. I kept watching the windows. I could see people inside moving, laughing, even clinking glasses. That's when I saw Lily's little face peek out through the curtain. Her eyes widened when she saw me in the car. Then she disappeared quickly. Not long after that, I saw Lena walk past the window. She was smiling, holding a wine glass. Then I saw her stop at the table and say something to Daniel. I couldn't hear her, of course, but her lips moved clearly. I read them. Let her wait in the car. She's not a priority tonight. I blinked. I wasn't sure I'd read that right. But then Daniel just nodded. He nodded. My own son. On my birthday. I could feel the tears rising, and I wiped them quickly with the back of my hand, like I used to do when Daniel was a baby and I didn't want him to see me cry. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I misunderstood. But when I looked back toward the house again, I saw them bring out the cake. It had my name on it. "Happy birthday, Mom," written in gold icing. They were lighting the candles without me. I didn't even know what to do. My throat tightened. I tried to swallow it down. I opened the glove box, took out a tissue, and stared at the raindrops sliding down the windshield like tiny little scars. That's when I heard a ding, another message. It was from Lena again. "Can you wait just a little longer? The kids are finishing dinner. It's crowded inside." Crowded? It was my birthday. My family. My place at that table. That house I'd taken money from my retirement to help them buy when Daniel lost his job 2 years ago. When Lena said they were going to lose everything if no one helped. When I said, "Don't worry. I'll make sure my grandchildren have a roof over their heads." I gave them $80,000 from my savings, and I never asked for it back. But now, I wasn't even allowed to sit at the table. I opened my phone again and almost called my sister. But I didn't want to talk. I just sat there in the car, waiting. 3 full hours. The rain never stopped, and neither did the celebration inside. They laughed. They toasted. They sang. And I cried. The worst part, Daniel never came out. Not once. He didn't even step outside to say, "Hi, Mom." I thought about all the birthdays I threw for him when he was little. The pirate-themed one where I stayed up all night making cardboard swords, or the time he asked for chocolate cake with extra frosting, and I made 2 just in case one wasn't enough. Now here I was, sitting in a cold car, with wet shoes, watching my family pretend I didn't exist. The night grew darker. Eventually, the lights inside turned off one by one. No one ever opened the door. Not to invite me in. Not even to say goodbye. I started the engine and drove off slowly. I didn't even look back. But something changed in me that night. Something quiet, but strong. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was done. Done pretending I didn't see what was in front of me. Done believing that maybe next year would be different. Done giving and giving while they only took. I whispered to myself as I drove. You forgot me tonight, but I remember everything. The rain didn't stop. Not for a second. It felt like the sky was crying with me. I sat there in the front seat of my small car, staring through the windshield as water streamed down the glass. The radio was off. My phone was quiet. The only sound was the gentle hum of the rain hitting the roof and the faint noise of laughter coming from inside that house. Their house. No, my son's house. The same house I helped them keep from foreclosure. I used my late husband's savings, money we were saving for my health, for my future. But I didn't care back then. I just wanted Daniel and his children to be safe. That night, I wasn't just left out in the cold. I was erased. Like I didn't matter. I turned off the car headlights and leaned my head back. My neck ached from sitting so long. My hands were still cold. The air inside the car smelled of damp fabric and old perfume. My dress, the blue one with the pearl buttons, was wrinkled from the seatbelt. I had imagined walking in, smiling as they clapped, hugging my grandkids. I had imagined warmth. But instead, I was a ghost. Alive. Awake. Watching. I looked toward the house again. From where I was parked, I could see into their living room. The curtains weren't fully closed. That's when I saw it. Daniel holding a wine glass. Lena sitting beside him, laughing with her sister. My grandson James playing on his phone at the table. And little Lily twirling near the cake. My cake. They were all inside. And I was what? An outsider. A burden. An old woman in a car. I don't think they meant to be cruel. But sometimes silence is louder than shouting. My stomach grumbled. I hadn't eaten since lunch. I thought they would feed me. I thought I'd be part of the family tonight. Instead, I sat chewing on an old mint I found in my purse, wiping tears from my cheeks in the dark. I looked at the small gift on the passenger seat, the butterfly hair clip I had bought for Lily. It was wrapped in soft pink paper with a silver ribbon. She would have loved it. But now I wondered, would she even remember me when she grew up? Would she say, Grandma used to come to our house? Or would she say nothing at all? I heard a loud burst of laughter from inside the house. They were playing some kind of game now. I saw Daniel throw his head back and laugh. His smile looked exactly like it did when he was 5 years old and unwrapping Christmas presents. But this time, he didn't look at me. I wanted to believe this was a mistake. That someone would come out. That the door would suddenly open and they'd say, Mom, what are you doing out here? Come in. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. They didn't forget. They chose. They chose not to include me. They chose to treat me like an obligation, not a person. I remembered last year. I had made a chocolate cake and brought it to their house. Lena didn't even touch it. She said, We're trying to eat clean this month. But the next day, she posted pictures of herself at a restaurant eating a giant slice of cheesecake. I remembered the year before that, when I made dinner for all of them and Lily spilled juice on the carpet. Lena blamed me. She said I wasn't watching her closely enough. I said nothing. Because mothers don't argue with their sons. Because grandmothers try to keep peace. Because I didn't want to lose them. But I was already losing them. Every year, little by little, they were pulling away. Not with anger. That would have been easier. But with indifference. And indifference is colder than hate. I turned my head and looked at the street. Empty. Just my car. No neighbors outside. No other visitors. And inside that house, my house in a way, they were celebrating the birthday of a woman sitting in a cold, parked car alone. I opened my purse again and pulled out my phone. It was 9:42 p.m. I had been out here for 3 hours and 15 minutes. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the photo gallery. The first picture was from years ago. Daniel holding Lily as a baby, smiling. I was next to them, clapping. The second picture, a selfie Daniel took with me and James at a school fair. Back then, I thought this is what love looks like. But now love looked like a locked door and unanswered messages. I heard a faint knock, not on my car, but inside my own chest. A kind of awakening. The kind that comes when you realize you're not waiting anymore. You're done. I took a deep breath. My hands stopped shaking. My eyes still burned, but I wasn't crying anymore. I reached over, picked up the little pink gift for Lily, and placed it gently back into my purse. Then I started the car. As the engine came to life, the headlights briefly lit up the house. Still no one came out. I drove away slowly. Past the houses. Past the neighborhood I once loved. Not a single person saw me leave. But I saw myself, maybe for the first time in years. And I told myself, this will never happen again. They made a choice tonight. Now it was my turn. And they had no idea what I was about to do. The next morning, I woke up with a sore neck and a heavy chest. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the rain. The windows. The cake with my name on it. Glowing in someone else's home while I sat alone in my car like a forgotten stranger. But what haunted me the most wasn't the silence. It was the sentence I'd read on her lips. Don't let her in, she'll ruin the night. Lena's voice played over and over again in my head, even though I never heard it with my ears. Just her mouth moving behind the window. Just those clear, cold words. Don't let her in. She'll ruin the night. I didn't ruin anything. I didn't complain. I didn't shout or make a scene. I didn't even knock twice. I waited in the car like she asked. I waited and waited while they laughed. I sat up in bed and looked around my room. The small apartment I'd moved into after I sold the house 2 years ago. A one-bedroom place with a little kitchen and fading paint on the walls. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It had silence, and sometimes silence is safer than noise. I pulled on my robe and walked to the kitchen. Boiled water for tea. I didn't feel like breakfast. My phone sat face down on the counter. Still no missed calls. Not from Daniel. Not from Lena. Not from the kids. Nothing. Not even a happy birthday message this morning. I guess the celebration was over. I took my tea and sat at the small table by the window. Outside, the sky was gray. The kind of dull gray that feels like life is stuck on pause. Then I opened my notebook, the one I used to keep records. Dates. Bank transactions. Notes. And reminders. I flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence. She said, don't let her in. She'll ruin the night. Then I stared at it. Over and over again. I remembered the first time I met Lena. Daniel had brought her home during his final year of college. She had long black hair, sharp eyes, and a bright smile. She was polite back then. Careful with her words. She called me Mom, even though I asked her to call me by my name. I thought that meant she cared. I gave her space. I offered her my necklace the day they got engaged. And when they couldn't afford a big wedding, I offered to help pay. Not because she asked, she never did. But because Daniel looked tired. And I never liked seeing my son tired. When James was born, I used to come over every weekend to help. I cooked. I cleaned. I took care of the baby while she slept. But slowly things changed. She started answering the door slower. She started calling less. And when I offered help, she said, we're fine. We've got it under control. I began to notice the little things. My casserole dishes were never returned. My name wasn't on the Christmas card anymore, just from Daniel, Lena, and the kids. And when I did visit, Lena always seemed tense, like I was sitting in the wrong chair. I told myself I was imagining it, that it's hard being a young mother, that maybe she just needed space. But it wasn't just space. It was distance. And then came the whispers, the glances, the moments she'd lean toward Daniel and say something, then they'd both glance at me like I couldn't hear. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and pretended I was fine, because mothers do that. Until last night, when I finally saw the truth for what it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not a bad day. But a choice. She didn't want me there. And Daniel let her win. He didn't fight for me. He didn't open the door. He just sat at the head of the table and let the night continue without me. He chose silence. And in doing so, he broke something between us. I stood up from the table, poured the rest of the tea down the sink, and walked to the bedroom closet. I pulled out a small metal box. It was dented in one corner and had a faded label on top that read, important. Inside were copies of my will, old insurance papers, a list of emergency contacts, and a letter I had written but never sent, one addressed to Daniel. I took a deep breath. Then I opened the will. Their names were still there, Daniel and Lena. Beneficiaries of everything. My savings. My insurance. The tiny land plot I still own back in my hometown. All of it meant for them. Because I believed they'd take care of it. Because I believed I mattered. But now I was just a shadow they kept outside in the cold. Because I'd ruined the night. I didn't need anger to make a decision. Just clarity. I took a pen and began writing new notes. Not full changes. Not yet, but plans. Steps. I wasn't going to act out of revenge. But I wasn't going to be invisible anymore, either. If they didn't see my value in life, they wouldn't profit from me in death. I picked up my phone and searched. Local estate lawyer, free consultation. 2 names popped up. I wrote them down. Then I looked at the final message Lena had sent me the night before. It's just a little crowded inside. Thanks for understanding. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I pressed delete, because I finally did understand. I understood exactly what I meant to her. Exactly how much space I took up in her heart. None. And I was done trying to squeeze myself into a place that didn't want me. They say a mother knows. Not always with words, but with feelings. And that night, when I looked at Daniel through the window, even through the rain, even from far away, I knew. He saw me. But he chose not to look. He chose not to come. I didn't imagine it. I wasn't being sensitive. I saw his face clearly. I watched as Lena whispered something in his ear. He turned toward the window. He saw the outline of my car. He paused for a second, just 1 second. And then he looked away. Just like that. Like I wasn't sitting out there alone on my birthday. Like I wasn't his mother. It wasn't just that he didn't open the door. He didn't even acknowledge me. That moment, it broke something deep inside me. Not loudly. Not with screaming or tears. But like a small, quiet snap, the kind you feel in your chest. A thread that's been holding too much for too long. Finally giving out. The next morning, I couldn't get his face out of my mind. That empty look. That choice. I sat in my kitchen again, holding a photo album in my lap. The one with Daniel's baby pictures. It was old and soft, the pages worn from years of turning. The first photo was from the hospital. He had a full head of hair. His eyes were closed. He was wrapped like a little bean. I remembered everything. The first time he said mama. His scraped knees from writing too fast. The way he clung to my hand on his first day of school. I remembered the way he'd cry when I had to leave for work. How I'd hug him tightly and whisper, "I'll always come back for you." And I did. Every time. But now, when I sat in that cold car, he didn't come back for me. Later that afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote him a letter. Not a formal one. Just a quiet one. The kind of letter a mother writes when her heart is too full and too tired. It said, "Dear Daniel, last night I sat in the car for 3 hours. I watched you hold a cake with my name on it. But you never looked at me. Not even once. I wasn't asking for a party. I wasn't asking for gifts. I was just asking to be seen. To be let inside. I don't know what happened between us, or why Lena sees me as a burden. But you know who I am. You know what I've done. And still you chose not to look. That hurt more than anything else in my life. I'll always be your mother. But from today forward, I'm no longer pretending I'm part of your world. You made it clear, I'm not. Take care of yourself. Mom." I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I folded the paper and placed it in the same box where I kept my will. Right next to the updated notes I had written the day before. That evening, I got a call. It was from Lily, my little granddaughter. Her voice was soft. "Grandma, why didn't you come in yesterday?" I closed my eyes for a second. My throat tightened. I said gently, "Sweetheart, they told me to wait in the car." I thought maybe they were surprising me. There was silence. Then she whispered, "Mom said you were too tired and didn't want to come inside." I smiled softly, even though my heart sank. "Did she?" I asked. "Yeah," Lily said. "But I saw you." I waved. "I saw you too, love," I replied. And I meant it. I saw her small hand behind the curtain. I saw her face pressed against the glass. Then she asked, "Can I come see you tomorrow?" I paused. My mind raced. I didn't want her caught in the middle. I didn't want to punish her for the choices of her parents. But I also didn't want to be the secret grandmother who only existed outside the house. So I said, "Maybe soon, sweetheart. I'll call your dad and ask, okay?" "Okay," she whispered. "I love you. I love you too." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. She was just a child. She didn't understand the games adults play. She didn't know what it meant to be excluded or erased. But one day she would. One day she'd remember the night her grandma wasn't at the table. And maybe she'd wonder why. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror. I looked at myself closely. The lines on my face. The gray in my hair. The eyes that had once cried quietly through 2 jobs, late bills, and a husband lost too young. I wasn't a burden. I was a woman who had sacrificed everything for a family that now saw me as a problem to manage. That truth hurt more than Daniel's silence. More than Lena's message. More than the 3 hours in the rain. because that truth meant the story of my motherhood had ended, without me even realizing it. He didn't see me anymore. Not even through the window. The next morning, I opened the box again. This time, I picked up the will. I stared at the page that said, "In the event of my death, all assets are to be transferred to my son Daniel and his spouse." And slowly, carefully, I drew a line through their names. Not out of hate, not out of revenge, but because love, when forgotten, should not be paid for in gold. There's a special kind of silence that comes after you realize you were never part of the plan. Not forgotten, not missed, just left out, like you didn't belong at the table, like you weren't needed. That's how I felt the day after my birthday. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't confused. I was simply quiet. Not the kind of quiet where you're waiting for someone to speak, but the kind where you stop hoping they ever will. The next day, my neighbor Mrs. Kaur knocked on my door. She had a small gift bag in her hand. "Happy late birthday," she smiled. "I meant to come by yesterday, but the rain." I took the bag gently. "Thank you. That's kind of you." She looked at me carefully. "Did your son have a party for you?" I saw a few cars at his house. I paused. My fingers tightened around the gift bag. I said softly, "Yes, he had a party. I was there too." But I didn't explain. Because how do you explain something like that? That you showed up. You were dressed nicely. You brought a present for your granddaughter. And still, no one opened the door. No one gave you a plate. No one saved you a seat. You just waited outside while your name sat glowing on a cake inside. After Mrs. Kaur left, I sat down with the gift she gave me. A small tin of butter cookies and a handwritten card. "To a kind soul who always smiles at everyone. You deserve a lovely year ahead." It made me cry, because sometimes a stranger can see you more clearly than your own blood. I decided to go for a walk. Not because I needed the air, but because I couldn't sit in the silence anymore. As I passed the florist on Main Street, I saw a new display of lilies. White ones. My favorite. Daniel used to buy me lilies on my birthday when he was younger. I still remember the year he saved up pocket money and brought me 2 stems in his little hands. I kept them in a jam jar on the windowsill for a week. But now, even a message was too much for him. Later that evening, I finally opened Facebook. I don't post much, but I wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, Daniel had shared something. And he had. A photo, taken from inside the house. The whole family smiling around the dinner table. The caption read, "Beautiful dinner for a beautiful night, celebrating the woman who holds our family together. #grateful #family love." I stared at it. My name wasn't even in the caption. Just the woman who holds us together. But I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't even near the house. I scrolled through the comments. Friends of Lena had commented. "She looks so happy. What a strong woman. You're lucky to have her. What a lovely birthday celebration." And then it hit me. They weren't celebrating me. They were celebrating her. Lena. My birthday dinner had turned into her party. My cake. My family. My name on the icing. But I wasn't even allowed inside. I shut off my phone and stared out the window. It was still raining. I thought about all the birthdays I spent baking, cooking, decorating for other people. I remembered how I stayed up past midnight to make Daniel's favorite lasagna each year, even when I had work the next morning. I remembered how I used to set up paper crowns and tiny signs that said, "You're special today." But now I wasn't special. I wasn't even invited. Later that night, I pulled out my old recipe book. Flour-stained, with curled edges and handwritten notes in the margins. My husband's favorite soup. Daniel's birthday cake, chocolate with cinnamon. Lily's favorite banana muffins. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Birthday, age 67, uninvited." Unseen. But not broken. Because I wasn't broken. Not yet. I made myself a small meal, toast, tea, and some leftover soup from the freezer. I lit a candle. Not for the celebration, but for closure. Then I made a decision. The next morning, I would go see someone. Not Daniel. Not Lena. A lawyer. I had made up my mind. If I wasn't invited to the table in life, then I wouldn't force myself into the conversation in death. But just as I blew out the candle, my phone buzzed. It was a message. From a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. "Mrs. Harris. I saw what happened last night. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they'd do that. Carla, Lena's sister." I froze. Carla. She had been there that night. She was the one pouring wine. I replied simply, "Thank you. That means more than you know." She sent one more message. Lena told everyone you weren't feeling well. She said you chose to stay in the car. I blinked. Chose. I chose to sit outside. I felt my hands clench. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was a lie. Carla continued. I thought you were just being shy. I would have come out if I'd known. I'm really sorry. I didn't know what to say. For years, I had blamed myself. I thought maybe I was hard to love. Too soft-spoken. Too old-fashioned. But now I realized. They didn't forget me. They rewrote the story without me. I closed the phone and stood in front of the mirror once again. Not to fix my hair. Not to check my makeup. But to look myself in the eye. And this time, I didn't see a mother. Or a grandmother. Or a woman trying to stay in the background. I saw a woman who had been left out of her own birthday. And who was finally ready to stop waiting at the door. Sometimes the worst pain doesn't come from being left out. It comes from hearing the truth when no one knows you're listening. And that's exactly what happened next. The day after I received Carla's message, Lena's sister, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing she had said. Lena told everyone you weren't feeling well. She said you chose to stay in the car. That one lie changed everything for me. They didn't just leave me outside. They made up a story so they wouldn't have to feel guilty. I kept replaying it in my head. They had justified my absence. Like I didn't belong because I didn't want to. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my hands folded tightly. I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall and thought about every time I had made excuses for them. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe Lena is under stress. Maybe Daniel is caught in the middle. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't just maybe anymore. It was crystal clear. The next day, I got another unexpected message. It was from Carla again. She had sent me a short audio clip. No words, just the sound of people talking and laughing in the background. The noise was muffled, but I could still make out the voices. I hesitated before pressing play. Part of me didn't want to hear it. But the other part, the part that was tired of pretending, needed to know. So I put in my headphones and pressed play. At first, it was just soft background noise. Glasses clinking. Light chatter. Then, Lena's voice. Sharp. Confident. A little too loud. The way people sound when they've had one too many glasses of wine. Honestly, she just sits around all day anyway. She would have just complained about the cold or asked for tea. Laughter. Then another voice, a woman. Probably one of Lena's friends. You're too nice. If it were me, I wouldn't have invited her at all. More laughter. Then came the words that cut through me like a blade. Lena again, clearer this time. It's fine. She'll be gone soon anyway. The table went quiet for a moment. Someone, probably Carla, said, Lena. But she kept going. I mean, look at her. She's what, 67? Always sick, always tired. She barely talks when she's around. Daniel's just trying to keep her comfortable. But let's be honest, she's already fading. We shouldn't let her ruin our night. They all laughed again. As if I were a topic. Not a person. Not a mother. Not the woman who raised Daniel alone after his father died. Not the woman who took on 2 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. Not the woman who gave them $80,000 to keep that very roof over their heads. Just someone who's fading. I dropped the phone. It slid onto the carpet beside my feet. My heart was pounding, but not from anger. From heartbreak. You can handle being ignored. You can even handle being forgotten. But being spoken about like that, like your life is already over, like your presence is an inconvenience. It's something else entirely. It's like being buried while you're still breathing. I sat there for hours. No food. No TV. Just silence. I looked at the walls around me, the old photos still hanging there. Daniel's school picture. His college graduation. One of him holding Lily on the day she was born. I had built a whole life around them. But they had already started planning their life without me. And worse, they were celebrating while doing it. That night, I lit another candle. Not for myself. But for my husband. He would have known what to say. He would have said, enough. You've given enough. But since he couldn't say it, I finally did. Out loud. To no one. To everyone. I've given enough. And I meant it. The next morning, I called the estate lawyer I'd found online. Her name was Emily. She sounded young but kind. I told her I wanted to come in. She said, Do you want to change your will? I replied, I want to update everything. She asked gently, May I ask why, ma'am? I paused for a moment, then said softly, Because I listened to a conversation that wasn't meant for me, and now I know where I stand. She didn't ask more. She just said, Come in at 10. At the office, I sat across from her and placed the papers on the table. She looked through them quietly. "You've left everything to your son and his wife," she noted. I nodded. "Yes. But that changes today." She looked at me carefully. "Do you want to remove them completely?" I nodded again. "Yes. Completely." She tilted her head. "Do you want to leave it to another family member? A grandchild, maybe?" I thought about Lily. Her little face. Her soft voice saying, "I love you." And it broke my heart. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Because she still lived in their house. So I shook my head. "No. Not yet." Emily gave a kind smile and said, "We can update this however you like. There are no rules for who deserves your legacy." Those words stayed with me. There are no rules for who deserves your legacy. After I left the office, I walked slowly down the sidewalk. The sky was clear. For the first time in days, the rain had stopped. I stopped at a small cafe, the same one I used to take Daniel to when he was a teenager. We'd sit at the corner table. I'd order tea. He'd get 2 muffins. We'd talk about life, about dreams, about how he wanted to make me proud. He already had. Long ago. But now, I realized something painful. I had raised a good boy, but I didn't recognize the man he had become. Later that evening, Carla called me. "I'm sorry I sent the recording," she said. I couldn't stay quiet. It didn't feel right. I replied softly, "Thank you for showing me the truth. It was hard, but it helped." She whispered, "I don't agree with them. You didn't deserve that. No one does." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "Sometimes we need to hear the worst to remember our own worth." Carla started crying. "You've always been kind. I don't know why she hates you so much." I said the quiet part out loud. Because kindness makes selfish people feel guilty. That night, I made one more change to my will. I wrote in a new clause. One that said, "None of my assets will be distributed to anyone who has spoken of me with cruelty in life." No names. Just the truth. And then I did something even bigger. I wrote a letter. Not to Daniel. Not to Lena. But to Lily. I didn't blame anyone. I just told her stories. Of how her dad used to laugh when he saw puppies. Of how she once fell asleep on my shoulder during a rainstorm. Of how love should always include a door being opened, not closed. And I ended the letter with one line. "If one day you wonder why I wasn't there, I hope you find this, and know I always wanted to be." The cake was the part one couldn't forget. It had white frosting, pink roses, and my name written in gold. "Happy birthday, Mom." Those words glowing under candlelight. A sweet message on the outside. But inside that house, I wasn't wanted. It was my name on that cake. My birthday. My family. But I didn't even have a chair at the table. They ate the cake. They laughed. They sang. And I sat in the car, cold, wet, waiting, watching from a distance like a stranger peeking through a window. I still remember how Lily twirled in her little dress. How Daniel raised his glass. How Lena smiled, holding a knife to slice the first piece. I even saw them take pictures. Pictures of a moment that was never mine. After I changed my will and wrote the letter to Lily, I thought I was ready to move on. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cake. And not just the cake. The space at the table where my chair should have been. I used to sit at that table every Sunday. I used to bring my own pie and tell stories about Daniel as a boy. Lily would sit beside me and rest her head on my arm. James would ask for seconds, and I'd always sneak him an extra scoop when Lena wasn't looking. That table used to feel like home. Now, it felt like proof that I didn't belong anymore. A few days passed. I didn't hear from Daniel. No message. No apology. No, Mom, are you okay? Nothing. The silence was its own answer. Then, on Friday morning, I got a notification on Facebook. Daniel had posted again. Another picture. This time, it was a close-up of the cake. The caption read, "A sweet night celebrating an incredible woman. Grateful for all her love over the years." It had over 200 likes. Comments full of hearts and kind words. "You're such a good son. She's lucky to have you. So sweet how you all made her feel special." I stared at it for a long time. Because none of it was true. I wasn't celebrated. I wasn't even seen. They celebrated my name, not my presence. They honored an idea of me, not the real person sitting outside soaked in rain. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. Instead, I got up, walked to my small storage closet, and pulled out an old photo album. One I hadn't opened in years. The first page had Daniel's baby footprints from the hospital. Next to it, a note I had written the day he was born. You'll never be alone. I'll always be there. Tears filled my eyes as I touched the ink with my fingertips. I had kept that promise. Even when it was hard. Even when I was sick. Even when I was tired. But he hadn't kept his. He wasn't there. Not when it mattered. Not when I was outside with shaking hands. Not when I waited an hour. Then 2. Then 3. Not even when I drove away without touching that cake. That afternoon, I received a call from Carla. She hesitated at first, then said, I know I shouldn't tell you this, but Lena's planning a family dinner this Sunday. She said you probably wouldn't come, so they didn't invite you. My voice was quiet. They didn't invite me at all? No, Carla whispered. Lena said, she had her night, that was enough. Enough? A night where I sat alone, unseen, soaking wet. And that was enough. I thanked Carla for her honesty. I didn't blame her. She wasn't part of this. But she was the only one telling me the truth. That night, I finally let myself feel it. The pain. The loss. The grief of watching your own child become a stranger. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just empty. And when you've given everything, your time, your money, your heart, and you still end up alone, you begin to ask yourself hard questions. Was I ever really part of their lives? Or was I just someone useful, until I wasn't? The next day, I went to a bakery. I bought a small cake. Vanilla. With strawberry filling. My favorite. I asked the lady at the counter to write something simple on top. To me, from me. She smiled and said, celebrating something special? I nodded slowly. Yes. I'm celebrating finally seeing things clearly. That evening, I lit a candle. I sat at my own table. No fancy glasses. No decorations. Just peace. And for the first time in years, I celebrated myself. Not the role I played. Not the sacrifices I made. Just me. I took one bite of the cake. It was soft, sweet, and perfect. And as I sat there, I realized something important. They had celebrated my name, because they didn't want to deal with the real me. The person with feelings. With memories. With worth. They used my name for photos. For compliments. For image. But they never gave me the thing that mattered most. A seat at the table. So from that night on, I made a new promise to myself. If someone only wants your name, but not your voice, your presence, your truth, then they don't deserve your love. The cake in their picture had my name, but not my heart, not my forgiveness, not anymore. When they forgot me, I stayed silent. When they laughed without me, I didn't speak. When they cut the cake with my name and didn't offer me a slice, I drove away. But I never forgot the one face in the window. Lily, my little granddaughter, the only one who looked out that night. The only one who saw me. And maybe, just maybe, the only one who truly understood what was happening. After I rewrote my will, removed their names, and quietly celebrated my birthday with a tiny cake and a lit candle at home, I thought that chapter of my life was done. But something unexpected happened. The following Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly. And there she was. Lily, wearing a yellow jacket, her backpack hanging off one shoulder. Her cheeks were red from the cold. I blinked in surprise. Lily. She smiled, but it wasn't her usual wide grin. This one was smaller. Shy. A little sad. Hi, Grandma, she whispered. My heart tightened. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Does your mom know? She looked down. Dad dropped me off. He said he'd be back in an hour. I told him I wanted to say hi. I stepped aside quickly and opened the door wide. Of course, come in, come in. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning my small living room. I had cleaned the night before, not because I expected guests, but because I needed something to do. She sat on the couch, took off her backpack, and hugged a pillow close to her chest. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said softly, I saw you. My hands froze. She looked up. That night, on your birthday, I saw you in the car. I nodded slowly. I saw you too. You waved. Her eyes filled with tears. I reached out and gently touched her hand. I didn't understand, she said. I asked Mommy why you didn't come in. She said you were tired, that you wanted to sit in the car. I gave a small smile. That's what she told everyone. But I knew she was lying, Lily whispered. I knew it. She reached into her backpack and pulled something out. It was a napkin, soft pink, folded carefully. She handed it to me without a word. I opened it, and written in her small, neat handwriting was a single word. Sorry. I stared at it. My hand shook a little. That napkin meant more than any gift, any card, any apology Daniel could ever give me. Because it came from someone who saw me and cared. My eyes filled with tears. I pressed the napkin to my chest and took a deep breath. "Thank you," I whispered. This means everything to me." She looked up at me. "You didn't look tired. You looked sad." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I was." She reached for my hand and squeezed it tightly. "I'm sorry they were mean." And in that moment, I didn't see a child. I saw someone braver than most adults I know. Someone who saw the truth and didn't look away. We sat there for a while. I made her hot chocolate with marshmallows, her favorite. She told me about school, her art class, her best friend Mia. But after a while, she asked, "Do you still love Daddy?" I paused. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to say too much. So I answered carefully, "I love who your daddy used to be. And I hope one day he remembers that version of himself." She nodded slowly, sipping her cocoa. "Mommy says you're not feeling well," she added. "That's why you don't come over." I smiled sadly. "That's not true, sweetheart. I wanted to come. They just didn't want me to." She looked down. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But you came today," I said gently. "And that means the world." Before Daniel returned, Lily stood by the door and gave me one more tight hug. Then she looked up at me and said something I'll never forget. "When I grow up, I'll never treat you the way they did." Tears rolled down my cheeks. I nodded and whispered, "I believe you." Then she opened the door and walked down the steps. Daniel didn't come inside. He stayed in the car. Lily got in, waved from the window, and they drove off. That night, I placed the pink napkin inside my photo album, right next to Daniel's baby picture, right next to the page I had once titled My Greatest Joy. Because that napkin, with one single word, gave me more love than I had felt from my own son in years. I didn't hear from Daniel after that. No message. No apology. But I didn't need one anymore. Because I had seen what kind of man he had become. And I had also seen what kind of young woman Lily was growing into. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a child's drawing. A house. A son. A small girl holding hands with a woman with gray hair and a big smile. Above it, Lily had written, "This is me and Grandma. We belong together." That was all I needed. I folded it and placed it inside my will folder. And then I wrote a note, in my own handwriting. To Lily, the only one who saw me. "One day, when you're ready, this will all be yours." Because sometimes, love skips a generation. And that's okay. As long as someone, anyone, remembers your worth. That drive home, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It wasn't just the cold. It wasn't just the rain running down the sides of my car, or the wet sleeves of my dress sticking to my arms. It was the feeling, like I had just left my own funeral. Only I was still alive. No hugs. No candles blown. No birthday song. Just silence. And the sound of tires moving through water as I slowly pulled away from the house I once helped save. I remember gripping the steering wheel tightly. My hands were freezing. My feet were wet from stepping in a puddle. My face expressionless. Not angry. Not crying. Just empty. Sometimes when something hurts too much, your heart goes quiet. Not because you've healed, but because it's too tired to speak. That's what happened to me. I kept looking at the clock on the dashboard. I had been outside their house for 3 hours and 24 minutes. In that time, they never once opened the door. Never once checked their phone. Never even waved. I sat out there while they toasted and cut a cake with my name on it. I watched them through the fogged-up glass, blurred like a bad memory I couldn't erase. At one point on the drive home, I thought about pulling over. Just sitting in a quiet parking lot until morning. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere anymore. But I didn't stop. I just kept driving. Past the bakery where I once bought Daniel his favorite cookies. Past the school Lily goes to, where I used to wait with a smile and a thermos of hot chocolate. Now I was the one waiting. Only no one was coming for me. When I got home, the hallway light flickered as I unlocked my door. The building was old. The carpet in the hallway was thin and rough under my wet shoes. I walked in slowly, shut the door behind me, and just stood there. The silence was loud. No voices. No "Happy birthday, Mom." No laughter. I left the gift I had bought for Lily on the table, still wrapped in pink with silver ribbon. I never gave it to her. Never got the chance. I took off my soaked coat and hung it up. Then I changed into warm pajamas and wrapped myself in a blanket on the couch. The clock read 10:37 p.m. I was officially 67, and I had spent it outside. Cold, wet, and completely forgotten. I turned on the TV, hoping for noise. But I didn't watch it. I just stared. I thought of all the birthdays before this one. The time Daniel made me pancakes when he was 8 and accidentally used salt instead of sugar. The time he wrote me a poem in high school and taped it to the fridge. The time I told him, "You're the best gift I ever got." Now he couldn't even open a door for me. I started wondering, when did it change? When did I stop being someone who mattered? Was it when Lena came into his life? Was it when I gave them money and expected nothing back? Was it when I became too quiet, too old, too easy to forget? Or maybe it was never one moment. Maybe it was a slow fade. The kind that happens when love isn't watered, when respect isn't taught, when people get comfortable using you and then get annoyed when you stay. I curled up on the couch and closed my eyes. I told myself, just rest. Just breathe. But even with my eyes closed, I saw their table. The candles. The smiles. The picture Daniel posted online pretending I was celebrated. He celebrated my name, not my presence. And that's when the truth hit me. You can be alive and still be erased. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed right away. I didn't feel like cooking. Didn't feel like folding laundry. Didn't even feel like brushing my hair. But I forced myself to stand. I went to the mirror. Looked at my reflection. There were lines on my face. Soft bags under my eyes. But what I noticed most was the sadness. A quiet kind. One that sits in your chest and whispers, "They forgot you." I opened the fridge and poured a small glass of juice. And as I sat at the table, alone, I whispered something I'd never said before. "You're still here. Even if they didn't see you, you're still here." That sentence stayed with me all day. I was still here. I had lived through heartbreak before. Losing my husband. Raising a child alone. Working 2 jobs. Going without, just so Daniel could have more. I had survived things that would break many. And I would survive this too. Later that week, I put the wrapped gift for Lily in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but because I wasn't going to show up at a door where I was unwelcome. If one day she came to me again, I'd give it to her. If not, I'd hold on to it as a reminder of the love I still had to give, to someone who wanted it. That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. I drove home cold, wet, and forgotten. But I didn't stay forgotten, because something inside me had changed. I wasn't chasing after their love anymore. I wasn't waiting at their table anymore. I had my own table. And even if it was quiet, it was mine. They took everything from me. My seat at the table. My voice in the room. Even my name on my own birthday. But what they didn't know, what they never even stopped to think about, was that I still had something they couldn't touch. Control. They thought I had already given it all. The house. The money. The future. But I hadn't. Because somewhere deep inside my bedroom, at the very back of my closet, under an old suitcase and 2 thick winter blankets, there was a safe. A small, gray metal box with a dial that stuck a little when you turned it too fast. It didn't look like much. But inside was everything. That evening, I couldn't sleep. After the silent phone call from Daniel. After Lily's napkin that said sorry. After the cake with my name, but no place for me to sit. I knew I had to stop just surviving. I needed to act. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with clarity. So I pulled the blankets off the top of the closet, bent down, and slid the safe into the center of the room. I sat on the carpet, cross-legged, just like I used to when I'd help Daniel build puzzles on rainy days. I turned the dial carefully. Right, left, right. Click. It opened. The first thing I saw was my wedding ring. I had placed it inside after my husband passed. I never wore it again, not because I didn't love him, but because wearing it made the pain heavier. I touched the gold band gently, then moved it aside. Underneath was a stack of documents. My original will. Deed copies. Savings account details. Retirement plan statements. Life insurance information. Letters I had written but never sent. I stared at the papers for a long time. Because these weren't just documents. They were the pieces of a life I had carefully built alone. Back when Daniel lost his job and the bank had almost taken the house, I had used this same safe to keep the loan agreement. I pulled out $80,000 from my emergency fund. I never told anyone how hard it was to do that. How I had to cash out my pension early. How I gave up my plan to visit my sister overseas. How I sold some old jewelry I had inherited just to cover the rest. Also, Daniel wouldn't lose his home. But after that day, they never asked if I had enough for myself. They never asked if I was okay. They just took. As I sorted through the papers, I noticed something I had forgotten. The original house deed. Signed only by me. Dated 8 years ago. With a handwritten note from the notary that read, "Held under Margaret Harris until title transfer requested in writing." And that transfer had never happened. I stared at the paper. My name. No co-owner. No lien. No second signature. I still owned it. I sat back, stunned. All this time, I thought I had handed over my legacy. But the truth was, I had only handed them my trust. And trust can be taken back. I reached for a folder marked Future Plans. Inside was the will I had written 5 years ago, the one that gave everything to Daniel and Lena. I held it in my hand. The same paper I once signed with love and confidence. Now felt like a mistake I couldn't leave behind. I took a red pen, and slowly, calmly, I drew one line through both of their names. Not out of hate, out of self-respect. Then I began writing again. A new will, a new plan. This time, not for the people who forgot me, but for the person who remembered. I didn't leave the house to Lily. Not yet. She was too young. But I set up something else. A living trust held in her name that would unlock when she turned 25. Only if she was living independently, studying, or working full-time. Because I didn't want her growing up expecting gifts. I wanted her to learn what I had always believed. Love must be earned, not inherited. I also added a handwritten note to the file. To Lily, if you're reading this, it means you saw me, when others chose not to. It means you opened your heart, when others closed the door. And for that, I leave you not just money, but the story of how I finally found my voice. Never forget that kindness is the greatest gift of all. And you gave it to me, with just one word. Sorry, Grandma. Once everything was signed, sealed, and properly filed, I did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I stood up for myself. And I finally said, even if only in my mind, I'm taking it all back. Not to punish them, but to protect myself. I returned the papers to the safe. But this time I felt different. Stronger. Wiser. And strangely lighter. I didn't need them to like me. I didn't need a place at their table. I had built my own. And inside that safe wasn't just money and property. It was proof. That I mattered. That I had built something real. That my life still held value. With or without their approval. The next morning, I woke up early. Made tea. And wrote 3 simple words on a sticky note I placed above the safe. You still can. Because for too long, I thought it was too late. Too late to change things. Too late to rewrite the ending. Too late to take back what was mine. But it wasn't too late. Not for me. Not for my future. Not for my voice. They forgot my birthday. But I remembered something more powerful. Who I am. I always thought everything I gave them was gone. The money. The house. The future I thought I had planned for them. After all those years of sacrifice, I truly believed I had nothing left. Not in my hands. Not in my heart. But I was wrong. Because even after being forgotten on my own birthday, even after sitting in the cold rain for hours, unwanted, even after they used my name for a cake and shut the door on my love, I still had something they didn't know. Everything was still in my name. I first learned that when I sat across from the lawyer, Emily, 2 weeks after the birthday that never really happened. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a voice that didn't rush. She had offered me tea and asked, "Do you want to talk about why you're making changes to your estate today?" And I had answered quietly, because I finally heard what they really think of me. She nodded. She didn't ask for details. She just listened as I explained that I had given my son and his wife $80,000 years ago to save their home. But I never changed the property title to their names. At the time, Daniel said we'd update the paperwork later. But later never came. Emily opened her laptop and looked up the property. She typed in the address. Paused. Scrolled. Then smiled softly and turned the screen toward me. There it was. In black and white. Property owner, Margaret Harris. Status active. Deed, fully paid. No co-owner listed. I blinked. She said, "It's still yours, Ms. Harris." They never changed it. I stared at the screen. All these years, I thought I had already handed it over. That I no longer had control. That the house I helped them save, the one I had stayed out of on my own birthday, didn't belong to me anymore. But I was wrong. It was still mine. For a moment, I felt two things at once. Relief and sorrow. Relief because I wasn't powerless. But sorrow because they never even asked. Never offered to sign it over. Never cared that I had protected them in silence. Daniel had assumed it was done. Lena had taken control. But neither of them had checked the truth. They forgot me. And forgot that I still held the key. Emily looked up and asked gently, "Do you want to transfer it now? Or keep it in your name?" I thought for a long time. Then I said, "I want to write a new agreement. One that makes everything clear." She nodded and began typing. That evening, when I got home, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. There was no shouting here. No lies. No fake birthday parties. Just the quiet knowledge that I had something left, and I could choose what to do with it. I remembered something Daniel said years ago when we were signing the first loan document. He was nervous. His hands were shaking. I had placed mine on top of his and said, "Don't worry. I trust you." He looked at me and said, "I'll never forget what you're doing for us." Now I realized. He had forgotten. A few days later, I went back to Emily with one request. I don't want them to lose their home. The kids live there. I raised Daniel to be better, even if he forgot me. She nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge," I said. "But I want clarity. I want a message." Emily looked thoughtful. "Would you like to include something in the trust file?" I nodded. I asked her to write a letter that would go into the house records. It said, "To Daniel and Lena, you live in a home you didn't build. You rest under a roof I kept above your heads. You celebrated my name, but left me outside. I gave you everything, not to be thanked, but to be remembered. But when you turned me away, you also turned away the love that protected you. This house is still in my name. You live in it because I allow it. Choose your next words and your next actions carefully. Because love gives, but love can also take back." "Mom." Emily folded the letter and said, "Do you want to notify them now?" I shook my head. "No. Let it sit. Like I did. For years." She smiled. "You're stronger than most people who come in here." I didn't say anything. Because I didn't feel strong. I just felt tired of being silent. Later that week, Daniel finally called. It had been almost a month. The phone rang twice. I stared at the screen. I answered with a quiet, "Hello?" "Mom," he said, "why haven't you been answering Lily's messages?" I paused. "I needed space," I said. He didn't apologize. Not at first. Then he added, "Lena thinks you're upset about the birthday. But we tried, Mom. You didn't want to come in." There it was again, the lie. I took a deep breath. "I waited outside for over 3 hours, Daniel. I saw you. I saw Lily. I saw the cake with my name on it." He didn't respond. I continued. "I heard what Lena said that night." Silence. "She said I'd be gone soon anyway," I whispered. "Did you agree with her?" His voice was low. "I didn't know she said that." I said softly, "But you didn't open the door either, did you?" More silence. Then finally, "No. That was it." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't even say sorry. Just no. It was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I received an email from Emily. All documents were finalized. The house was still mine. The trust was sealed. And Daniel's name was nowhere on it. She had even added a clause that said, "Any change in occupancy must receive direct written approval from Margaret Harris or her chosen representative." Which meant, if I wanted to, I could sell it. I could rent it. Or I could give it to someone else. But I didn't make a move yet. Because it wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the one thing they had taken from me. Dignity. Now I had taken it back. And they didn't even know it. The morning I left the letter, I didn't cry. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt free. Free from pretending. Free from waiting. Free from hoping they'd treat me better someday. Because now I finally understood something I had ignored for years. People will only value you when you value yourself first. And after everything that happened, being left in the car, hearing the cruel things they said, learning the house was still in my name, I decided it was time to say goodbye. On my own terms. It was a quiet Sunday. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. No rain. No wind. Just soft sunlight pouring through my window. I woke up early and made myself tea. Then I took out a plain white envelope, a black pen, and one sheet of paper. I thought about what I wanted to say. And more importantly, what I wanted them to remember. Not out of revenge. Not to hurt them. but to tell the truth, clearly, calmly, and completely. I wrote the letter slowly, each word with care. It said, "Dear Daniel and Lena, you may never understand how deeply you hurt me. You may never think twice about leaving me outside in the rain on my birthday. You may think it wasn't a big deal, that I'm too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. But you didn't see what I saw. I saw my name on a cake I didn't get to taste. I saw candles lit for someone who was left in a car. I saw a family smiling in pictures while the person who gave them everything sat alone outside, cold and forgotten. I heard the words you said that night, Lena. You said I'd be gone soon anyway. You said I'd ruin the night. Well, here's what you didn't know. I'm not gone. I'm not weak. And I never ruined anything. I carried this family for years. I gave more than I had. I protected you when no one else would. And I stayed silent while you slowly erased me. But now, I am done being silent. The house you live in, I saved it. The money you used, I gave it. The roof over your children's heads. I sacrificed my retirement to make it happen. And now you know the truth. It's still in my name. Not to scare you. Not to throw you out. But to remind you that what you built was never fully yours. Because you never built it. I did. And even after all the pain, I still won't take the house away. But I will take away something else. Your place in my heart. Your name from my will. Your control over my peace. You lost more than you know. You lost a mother who forgave you more times than she should have. You lost the only person who truly cared about your future. You lost my trust, and once that's gone, there's no getting it back. This letter isn't a threat. It's a door closing. And when it shuts, it doesn't reopen. I hope one day, Lily grows up and becomes the kind of woman who opens doors, not closes them. I hope she chooses kindness over comfort, truth over image, and love that is earned, not expected. Because if she does, I'll leave her something. Something more important than money or property. I'll leave her my story, so she knows how not to treat people who give their all. Goodbye, Mom. I folded the letter, slipped it into the envelope, wrote their names across the front. Then I got dressed. Calm, steady, strong. I took the bus to their neighborhood. It was the same road I had driven so many times before. The road I drove on that night when I left their house in the rain, wet and heartbroken. But this time, I wasn't looking at the windows for someone to notice me. This time, I was looking straight ahead. I arrived around 9:15 a.m. The street was quiet. Most families were still asleep or having breakfast. I walked up to the front porch. No one saw me. I placed the envelope gently on the doormat. And before I turned to leave, I looked at the door one last time. Not with hope. Not with longing. But with finality. I didn't wait. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't look back. I walked away, one step at a time, until their house became smaller and smaller behind me. And when I reached the corner, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like myself again. Not someone's backup plan. Not a forgotten guest. Not a woman waiting to be invited in. But a woman who had found her voice again. And used it. When I got home, I opened my window and let the breeze in. I made myself breakfast, real breakfast, with eggs and toast and fresh fruit. Not the sad cup of tea I'd had the morning after my birthday. I turned on soft music. Lit a candle. Sat at the table and said aloud, "You did the right thing." Later that afternoon, I received a message. It was from an unknown number. It said, "We got your letter. I'm sorry. Daniel." That's all it said. No phone call. No real apology. Just a single message that came too late. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I had already closed that chapter. And once I close something, I don't reopen it just because someone knocks late. I took out my will folder one last time. Checked the documents. Everything was in place. The house was still mine. My assets were protected. And Lily, sweet, kind, innocent Lily, was named as my successor when the time came. I had left her a copy of the napkin too. The one that said, "Sorry." I wanted her to know she was the one who saw me. And that's what matters in the end. Not how many people toast your name. Not how many pictures you're tagged in. But who opens the door when you knock. As I lay in bed that night, I didn't feel sad. I felt strong. Like I had finally taken my story back. I wasn't the woman left in the car anymore. I was the woman who walked away with dignity. Who told the truth. Who chose peace over pretending. And somewhere, deep in the quiet of that night, I whispered to myself, "They lost more than they know. But I gained something they never will. Self-respect."